Brutal Slave Tortures You Were Never Taught in School, Parts 2 through 4. Part 1 will be attached at the end of this video. Nose slitting. The nostrils of slaves were slit with knives as punishment. It marked them publicly and made breathing difficult and painful. This was often done to women accused of disobedience. In 1785, South Carolina owner William Butler slit the nose of a female slave named Ruth after she refused to obey his wife's orders, causing lifelong breathing issues. Iron bit. A gag-like device placed in the mouth attached to a metal bar around the head, preventing speaking and causing bleeding and choking, often used for days at a time. In the 1850s, North Carolina, overseer Henry Jacobs forced iron bits on a teenage girl named Mary for 2 weeks after she shouted back during a labor dispute on the plantation. Cropping. Cutting off parts or all of a slave's ears with a knife. Meant to be a permanent mark of disobedience. Cropped slaves were often mocked or shunned. In 1810, Kentucky, plantation owner Micajah Ricks cropped the ears of a 14-year-old boy named Tom after his third escape attempt to serve as a signal warning. Shackling. Iron chains were used to bind ankles, wrists, or necks. Slaves were sometimes forced to sleep, eat, and work in chains. The metal caused bruising, infections, and long-term pain. During the Middle Passage in 1790, ship captain James Stewart shackled all enslaved people aboard the Brooks tightly by wrist and ankle to prevent rebellion during the transatlantic voyage. The whipping post. A public pole where slaves were whipped in front of others, meant to terrorize the enslaved community into obedience. Some slaves died from blood loss or shock. In 1833, plantation owner John Lycurgus in Mississippi beat Millie at the whipping post for singing spirituals. Her back so torn she nearly died from shock and exposure. Iron handcuffs. Different from regular shackles, these were extra tight and spiked. They cut into the wrists and made basic tasks painful. Used to punish those suspected of planning rebellion. 1852 Louisiana, owner Pierre Duval chained conspiracy suspect Kofi in spiked iron cuffs for a month after suspected plotting. His wrists were lacerated and infected. Stretching rack. A torture device used to stretch the limbs apart painfully, caused torn muscles and damaged joints. Less common, but used in Caribbean for runaways. In 1798 Barbados, overseer Charles Montague put rebel slave Samuel on a rack after he led a small uprising. Samuel's arms and legs were torn nearly from their joints. Burning with hot tar. Slaves had boiled tar poured on their skin. This caused severe burns and sometimes death from infection, often followed by feathering as public humiliation. Have you ever heard of tar and feathering someone? In 1765, Jamaica, plantation owner Thomas Thistlewood burned runaway slave Jenny with hot tar for 2 hours to humiliate her and discourage others from escaping. Confinement boxes. Small wooden boxes that barely fit a body. Slaves were locked in for days with no food or water. This caused headaches, madness, or death. In 1847, South Carolina, overseer Samuel Blake put slow worker Isaac into a crate-like confinement box for 5 days. Isaac emerged delirious and incontinent. Castration. Male slaves had their testicles removed as punishment or control. This caused shock, infection, and death. It was also used to destroy the will to resist. In 1820 Georgia, plantation owner Nathaniel Brady ordered the castration of Joshua after accusing him of impregnating a white woman. Joshua died later of infection. The Spanish chair. This was a heavy chair fitted with tight straps and sometimes sharp edges. Slaves were tied in and left for hours or days unable to move. Circulation would cut off and muscles would cramp painfully. In 1796 in Cuba, Don Manuel Espinosa used a Spanish chair on a slave named Mateo, leaving him restraining for 3 days after he broke a plow during sugarcane harvest. Knee spreader. A metal or wooden device forced slaves' knees apart unnaturally. It caused excruciating hip and groin pain. Used mainly on women as punishment for sexual defiance or refusal. In 1842 Virginia, plantation owner Carter Wilkins used a knee spreader on an enslaved girl named Tilda after she refused sexual advances from a white overseer. The pickaninny punishment. A term used to describe torturing enslaved children to control adults. Children were whipped or starved in front of their parents. This created emotional terror and forced compliance. In 1834 Alabama, slave owner Henry Watkins beat 7-year-old James in front of his mother, Louisa, to punish her for talking back. The whip tree. A specific tree where slaves were tied and whipped publicly. Others were forced to watch as a warning. Blood soaked the tree bark over time. In 1801 Louisiana, on John du Plantier's plantation, a runaway named Joseph was whipped at the whipping oak after being caught stealing horses. Ear nailing. Slaves' ears were nailed to walls or posts as punishment. They had to stand still or rip their own flesh to escape. This caused severe infection or deformity. In 1760 South Carolina, enslaved man named Toby was nailed by both ears to a wooden fence by overseer Elbert Clay for leaving the field early. Hobbling. Slave owners cut or damaged tendons in the legs to prevent running. Slaves became permanently crippled. This was especially common with repeat escapees. In 1823 Mississippi, owner Calvin Cross slit the tendons behind a slave named Elijah's knees after his third escape attempt. Burial up to the neck. Slaves were buried in the ground up to the neck as punishment. Insects, sun, and animals would attack them. Some suffocated or were eaten alive by insects. In 1775 Barbados, planter Elias Frith buried a female slave named Anika for 2 days. For breaking a water jug, she was found unconscious and scarred. Salt in wounds. Salt or pepper was rubbed into open, whipping wounds. It caused burning pain and delayed healing. This was also used with vinegar or urine for extra pain. In 1831 Jamaica, slaveholder Charles White had a girl named Sarah whipped and salt poured in her wounds after she allegedly stole fruit from his table. Tongue piercing. Slaves were forced to have their tongues pierced with metal rods. This stopped them from speaking or eating solid food, often used on those who prayed or preached. In 1806 Georgia, owner William McFadden ordered preacher Isaiah's tongue pierced after he was caught reading scripture to other slaves. Hot branding iron on the face. A hot iron was pressed onto the cheek, forehead, or jaw. This created permanent facial scars, often with initials, used to identify runaway slaves. In 1827 South Carolina, owner Thomas Melton branded the letter R on the left cheek of a slave named Jacob for running away twice. Forced nakedness. Slaves were stripped naked as humiliation or control, often done before beatings or during slave auctions. This dehumanized them in front of others. In 1855, Louisiana slaveholder Amos Layton paraded 3 naked women through town after accusing them of witchcraft to, quote unquote, shame the demons out. Forced mouth washing. Slaves were punished by having their mouths filled with soap or lye. This burned the tongue and throat, and was often used when a slave talked back. In 1840 Mississippi, enslaved girl Phoebe had her mouth washed with lye by Martha Thompson, the mistress of the house, after complaining about food. Forced labor in chains. Slaves were made to work the fields or build while shackled. Chains limited movement and caused bruising. This was used to humiliate or punish the slow moving. In 1830 Virginia, enslaved man David worked for 3 months in ankle and wrist chains under plantation owner Samuel Carter for not meeting cotton quotas. Forced ducking. Slaves were submerged in water repeatedly to simulate drowning. This was used as punishment or mocked baptism. Victims sometimes died of shock. In 1822, Charleston, South Carolina, George Hall ducked a slave named Priscilla in a river for refusing to say her new Christian name. The Virginia Creeper. A twisted leather whip with 3 branches and metal ends. Each lash tore skin deeply and quickly. This was used when overseers wanted maximum pain on the enslaved. In 1850 Virginia, overseer Jackson Lee whipped enslaved man named Peter with the Virginia Creeper for sneaking food, resulting in 107 visible scars. Use of dogs. Dogs were trained to attack, bite, or track runaway slaves. Some slaves were mauled to death. This caused extreme fear and trauma. In 1845, Florida, owner John Barnell unleashed dogs on runaway boy named Isaac. The dogs mauled his leg so badly it had to be amputated. Burying alive. Rare, but used to execute rebellious slaves publicly. The slave was buried whole or chest deep until death. This was meant to terrorize others. In 1792, Saint Domingue planter Jean-Baptiste buried alive a rebel named Cadeau after he was caught leading a plantation revolt. Needle puncturing. Needles or nails were stabbed into sensitive areas, used to punish women who resisted sexual abuse. Often done in private or by mistresses. In 1803 Alabama, Mistress Eleanor Price used pins to pierce the inner thighs of an enslaved girl named Rose for refusing to wear revealing clothing. Teeth pulling. Teeth were removed with pliers without anesthesia. This was done as punishment or to prevent biting. This caused infection and speech issues. In 1844, Georgia, overseer Richard Carr had 2 front teeth pulled from an enslaved boy named Jesse after he bit a white boy during a fight. Forced isolation or starvation. Slaves were locked in sheds, closets, or holes without food. Some were left for days or weeks. This caused hallucinations, malnutrition, and death. In 1837, Mississippi, owner Martha Bishop locked 12-year-old Lena in a dirt cellar for 10 days after she spilled milk, leading to permanent vision damage. Smoked alive. This punishment involved placing a slave in a confined space, like a pit or hut, and lighting a smoky fire around them. The smoke would burn the eyes, throat, and lungs, causing choking, blindness, and sometimes death. Victims were often left for hours, suffocating slowly as the smoke filled their lungs. In 1777, Jamaica, plantation owner Thomas Thistlewood punished an enslaved man named Derby by locking him in a smokehouse and lighting a fire of green wood beneath him. Thistlewood recorded in his diary that Derby was left half dead and blind for stealing sugarcane. The hogshead. A hogshead was a large wooden barrel, often used for storing tobacco, sugar, or rum. As a punishment, slaves were forced into these barrels, which were sealed, rolled, or left in the sun. Victims suffered heat, exhaustion, suffocation, bruises, and sometimes broken bones from the tight, airless space. In 1791, Virginia, plantation owner Robert Carter forced an enslaved man named Joe into a hogshead barrel for talking back during a tobacco inspection. Joe was sealed inside for hours under the sun, emerging unconscious and covered in bruises. Suspended beneath a cooking fire. This torture involved tying a slave under a cooking pot or cauldron while a fire was lit above them. The victim was slowly burned by falling hot grease, boiling water, or embers, causing severe burns and permanent disfigurement. Sometimes the slave was suspended by their wrists or ankles, increasing the agony as the heat intensified. In 1756, South Carolina, plantation mistress Mary Chestnut punished a kitchen slave named Dinah by suspending her beneath an iron pot while cooking lard. Hot grease dripped onto Dinah's back for hours after she accidentally spilled stew, leaving her with lifelong scars. The last slave torture mentioned in this video, because there are many more than this, is public burnings. Public burnings were used as a brutal method of execution or extreme punishment of enslaved people accused of rebellion or crimes. The victim was tied to a stake and burned alive in front of other slaves and townspeople to instill fear and obedience. This torture caused unimaginable agony as the flames consumed the body slowly, sometimes over several minutes. In 1745, New York, an enslaved man named Kufi was publicly burned at the stake by order of Governor George Clark after being accused of participating in a supposed slave revolt. The entire slave community was forced to watch as a warning. The tortures enslaved people endured during the transatlantic slave trade were more brutal than most history books will ever admit. From public burnings to iron collars, these punishments were designed to break both body and spirit. After hearing these horrifying stories, here's a question for you. If slaveholders faced the exact same tortures they inflicted on their own slaves, would they have wanted to end slavery sooner? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I really want to hear what you think. I am more than excited to let you know that I have launched my new store, Legends and the Unknown. For the month of August, you can get a 10% discount by typing the word Legends as the promo code in all caps. That's only for this month, August 2025. Keep in mind that all the items come in several colors, so just because you don't see your color doesn't mean that I don't have that color available. So I have black and white sweatshirts available also, and different color mugs, and all of the t-shirts and sweatshirts come in various different colors. So please click on the items and then look for the color that you enjoy and select it, and take advantage of that 10% off promo code for this month of August. I thank you for watching. I thank you for listening, and remember,